Hello, you guys. Welcome back to the Sweat Symbol podcast. I am so excited because I have Rachel Jackson here, who was the creator of Your Guide to Be. I'm so excited to have Rachel on the podcast today because she's really created this holistic approach and alternative to therapy that's really, really impactful. And the types of things that you help people work through are things that I know my audience is really struggling with. So, before we dive into all these juicy topics, I'd love for you to tell everyone a little bit more about what you do, how you help people, and really just the inspiration behind your guide to be.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I have so many things that I'm very passionate to speak about today. So to give a little bit more backstory, I started Guide to Be after working within traditional therapy for a few years, getting my master's in marriage and family therapy, and then really starting to feel like there were some gaps in the system of how I could support people. So to put it in the shortest terms, I would say that societal conditioning is something that has become a topic that I'm very passionate about within working with clients, of noticing that we're holding ourselves back from the ultimate healing or the most easeful healing, and making it really hard by placing a lot of pressure on ourselves, making therapy really transactional, missing this human part of like normalizing that we do struggle with body image, we struggle in our relationships, me and my clients included, and making it more palpable that like I am a human too, and like my relationships aren't perfect, my relationship, my body is not perfect, and I think we all need that in our world. I think something that has become really true to me is that we need a little bit more connection, and it's a key part to our healing. So I created Guide to Be with that in mind, so I can be more interactive with my clients. I use messaging so my clients have access to me at all times so that we can really heal in real time, and really use this holistic approach with somatic experiencing, sound healing, yoga, along with the verbal processing of more of a therapeutic like lens, but taking in a more coaching route.
I love that so much because I feel like I've worked with therapists in the past where, like you said, it just does feel really transactional. They're giving you worksheets and it's like, okay, I'll see you next session. But I feel like there's so much that happens in your day-to-day life. So just having that access to someone who's like more readily able to connect with you and be there for you for everything, not just an hour every 2 weeks or so, is really
Yeah.
it's like so much more impactful.
Yeah, and I see more transformation in my clients when they know I'm caring about them and that I'm there for them in the interim. It actually makes my job, quote unquote, like easier to have more connection because I feel the transformation, I feel the connection, and they do too.
And I'm sure you're able to get just so much deeper in their day-to-day life, instead of
Yeah.
only having like 60 minutes to just try to really
Pack as much
solve
in.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of people listening to this podcast and who work with me are typically looking to lose weight, but a lot of times people think that if they just lose the weight or like they just reach like X number on the scale, then all of a sudden they'll have all of this confidence and really like love themselves. But what happens is they often find that when they reach that weight, they're still not happy. They still don't have that confidence. So, something I'd really love for you to go into a little bit more detail about is just a little bit more about like body image and self-worth and how to, maybe remove some of that connection between, well, I'll be happy when I get here.
Absolutely. Yes. So much to say around that. I think you're touching on a piece that we as humans want to make sense. And so we're always going to, from a mental and psychological standpoint, try to attach to something tangible. And body image, as much as it's something physical we can see and we can put a quote unquote number to on the scale, is really intangible. I think something that we miss sometimes is our body is our physical like vessel for something internally that's very intangible. It's energetic, like our body is energy, and we then confine it with trying to put a number to it of I will be happy when I hit this weight, I will be happy when I fit into this size pant, or can do X amount of number of miles per hour on the treadmill or whatever it may be, fitness or body related, weight related. And it's much more about getting in tune with the emotions that live in the body. And so oftentimes when I work with clients, I try to go to this place of your body is this external piece of you, but internally you're associating a lot of, it's really an attachment style to your body that's either secure or it's disorganized or it's anxious. And we're operating in an attachment style way with food, with exercise, trying to numb or fixate in feeling better or relieving some of the discomfort and bring more comfort to our emotional body, the emotions that really live in the body. Yeah.
So how do you go about starting to take those steps, instead of like tying so much of it to this like end goal? Are there, specific steps or I'm sure it's a lot more complex than that, but what are the things that people can start doing to kind of stop having such an attachment to their physical like body image?
Absolutely. I know that I've mentioned this to you before, but self-compassion overarchingly, I think, is something that can feel very ambiguous. Like, how do I be more compassionate to myself? I think we all know we're our biggest critics. We can love. I have so many clients that say, I look at other women or other males' bodies and I'm like, they look great. And then I look at myself in the mirror and I just criticize every little piece. And so we're much more compassionate to other people, and we often have a harder time do that to ourselves. So the first thing I start with is like, where did you learn about how you should interact with your body? How did you listen to, most specifically, how did you listen to your mother talk about your body? There is a really deep psychological attachment to our woman or female figures in our lives and how we look at our bodies, because our bodies are most often a feminine like energy that we need nurturing from. So food, exercise, our bodies in general need nurturing, and we then take out the nurturing from our relationship with food. We take out our nurturing from our relationship with movement, and see it as more of a checklist. See it as more as the number on the scale, and we're missing this emotional piece of the compassion, the love, the fuel, the attunement to what your body really is craving, what it really needs. We'll talk about cravings later because that often comes up as well. But first and foremost, what can we deconstruct from what you've learned about food, exercise, your body, your worth, most importantly? And then how can we get you more physically attuned to what your body is wanting, needing? Again, that often takes a little bit of practice. It's just like working a muscle at the gym. You need to build more comfort in being more attuned, because we are not often comfortable with being really in tune, present in our bodies, because we're taught in many, many ways to abandon our bodies because our bodies are uncomfortable, because the emotion is uncomfortable, because you cannot feel that way right now. All these different things from the times we're really, really young kids of needing to suppress and abandon something that we're very strongly feeling.
That's all so interesting, especially that nurture piece and like a lot of the messages and the way that you are feeling about your body is really stemming from things that you heard as a kid. And a lot of times that's why people end up working with me is they're like, yes, I want to do this for myself, but I also want healthy habits so that my kids aren't picking up on the things that I picked up on. And like I remember that from my childhood, my mom never liked her arms and she was always like I always thought my mom was so beautiful, but she would be like, I hate the way my arms look in this top. So then it's like naturally you start kind of picking apart your own body and so yeah, I just think that's like such an interesting piece of how do you kind of start taking care of yourself now to break this cycle for like future generations.
Yeah. Yeah, and Brooks, as you mentioned, like breaking the cycle, something that I really try to tune into is we've never arrived at being fully healed. And I often feel that I hear from clients, like, I thought I healed from this. And there's so much, I feel like you really hone into this with your clients of like moderation. And it's not going to look perfect all the time. You've never really, quote unquote, like made it. And I think that's really important when it comes to body image, because we're constantly being told subconsciously, like in little covert messages in our world, how we should look, right? Just like looking at a billboard, watching a movie, seeing an ad, we're taking in this information constantly. And so these triggers are going to come up, and we may feel like really good in our bodies of like, oh, wow, we got a breakthrough with not really attaching to the number on the scale, or feeling better in our bodies, or feeling like we're more confident and more embodied overall in how we feel, look from the inside out. But it doesn't mean it's not going to bubble up again. And so how can we not be so critical when those discomfort moments come back and that self-criticism comes back, and let it like flow through you more? It's more of a somatic way to allow emotions to move through you. But the self-criticism is a really important point, because your nervous system is responding to that self-criticism, and often like a fight, flight, freeze response.
Yeah, I love that because I actually hear that often, like especially when it comes to like my clients and their relationship with food. Like sometimes they're getting really frustrated because they have like, maybe a more anxious week, or they're extra stressed at work that week. And they're like, I thought I had worked through this, but now all of a sudden these like old thought patterns are
Yeah.
coming back around like restriction, and they do immediately get, negative or judgmental about it because they're like, I thought I solved for this. And I'm like, okay, you had these thoughts though for sometimes like 10, 20 years, and you've been working on it for 6 months and you've made absolutely amazing progress. But you're like, it's normal that these thoughts are still going to pop up from time to time. And it's more about what do you do when those thoughts do pop up, you know? So I love that you said, I usually say, like, are you able to dismiss the thoughts more quickly? But I love that you called out, like, yes, recognizing them, but not judging yourself for them, not being critical when they do pop up, and like recognizing that this is still always going to be an ongoing journey.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think when you say like honoring when they come up, you bring up a piece of like the inner child work of say, yeah, this has been something you've been living in for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? You know,
Yeah.
where you are in your journey or how old you are. This is a habit of unlearning and creating your new paradigm, your new story around your body, your new story around food, your new story around movement, that is, like I always say to people, like, that isn't outdated. Like, you've maybe outgrown that mindset. You've outgrown that doesn't work for me anymore. And
Yeah.
so different phases, and even like as somebody maybe has a child, or they go through, just the aging process, your relationship with your body is going to require a new story. And you can't always live, with the story that worked for you 10 years ago. And so you're constantly shifting, and that's where like the healing is not always done. But how can you speak to that inner child part of you that's fearful of your body changing, that's fearful of the number on the scale creeping up, and say, I'm going to nurture that part of me that's scared, because we do naturally hold a lot of meaning around how we look. It's hard to, I can't tell anyone that that's something that we can just let go of. I think it's part of being human in our world, at least right now. But the more that you can, hold yourself lightly and say, it's valid, I feel this way, I think the more you can like soften, and then your body also can get into the, rest and digest. Again, I'll talk more about nervous system. I think that part is huge in this process. But yeah, absolutely. Like, loving yourself through the emotional roller coaster.
I love that. And it's almost like giving yourself permission to change. I think a lot of people, when they are trying to like lose weight or just like make these changes in general, they almost feel bad when these things aren't able to be their number one priority. Like when some of my clients are like, I just have so much else going on in my life. It feels like way too much to try to like lose weight right now. It's like, okay, you're allowed to not lose weight. Like you're allowed to have seasons of your life where like your health and fitness are not your number one priority. So like, how do you continue to just give yourself permission to do that?
Yeah, permission is so powerful. I actually just love that word so much. It allows you to like, again, I'll talk I just think in general, something that has been really prevalent for me, especially with my clients most recently, is like emotions are energy. We, as like similar to a number on the scale, we attach this external meaning of like good emotion, bad emotion.
Yeah.
And that doesn't allow the emotion to move. It like puts it in a box, confines it, and says, don't feel that way, or you're okay to feel that way. So the more that it can just be, oh, I'm feeling this way and not attaching a meaning. Oh, my body feels bloated today, not attaching a meaning. My body
Love
feels
that.
heavy today, not attaching a meaning. My body feels really light today, not attaching good or bad, right? Like just saying, I'm just noticing and being more observant versus needing that external label.
That is like such a like light bulb moment because I feel like so often when you see the scale pop up or you do feel bloated, you immediately go into, or at least a lot of my clients go into logical solve mode. They're like, I feel bloated today, but yesterday I had a ton of sodium and I went out to eat. And, oftentimes I get it. I'm the one who's also giving them the rationale between because like why the scale is up, but just not even needing to go into that logical place and just being able to say like I'm feeling bloated today. That's it. And then being able to move
End
on.
of sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I really find that labeling piece important, and kind of coming back to the idea of how I, really formed Guide to Be in general is we label everything. And it's really sad when you think about it. And it's valid because we are humans that need to make sense. But when we're trying to make sense of the world, it's so that we can move safer through it. And so these labels support us in our trying to understand, how can me, Rachel, move through the world most successfully, most easily? How can you, Brooks, do the same? And so we label to find our most easeful path for us. It's not the most easeful path for another, but these labels can then start boxing us, especially as we begin to get older. There's more boxes, more labels, more ways that we've assigned ourselves to being. And I find that, the reason I quote unquote left traditional therapy and dropped the label of therapist is so that I can give my clients the permission to do the same, because that's, I think, where we really see the transformation. That's where we really feel like healing can happen, where it can be like, I'm not stuck. I'm not stuck in this
Yeah.
box. I always tell people it's like, I want to give people the get unstuck approach. And that means that, you're not assigning the label. You're saying, I don't need to be what I think it means to be successful, what the world has told me it means to be worthy, meaning, I'm thin. I'm
Yeah.
X amount of, pounds on the scale, or this is how I present, to people. It's how do you need to show up today and take yourself out of that moment of pressure and expectation.
I feel like that can almost be sometimes the first step to like true transformative change is allowing yourself to change and not be stuck in these labels, Like I know a lot of people when they first start their fitness journey, they're like, well, I've never been successful or like I've always failed at this, And then you start to get stuck in that mindset of like, I'll just never lose the weight. I'll never, I'll never be happy. So just allowing yourself to like yeah, remove those labels, I think can be so important.
Yeah. Right. And like, even when you say that, like it makes me sad. It makes me actually my chest tighten when you
Yeah.
say like the word, like, I will never be successful, or
Yeah.
I've never been successful at this. I've always failed. Immediately you're going into this process of tightness, boxed, like this is
Yes.
work. And you're actually protecting yourself in doing that, because if it doesn't work out, I told myself it wasn't going to.
Oh my God, yes. Yes. You're like almost you're holding yourself back because you're like, well, it's always been this way?
Right. And when we can expect that that pattern's going to repeat, it feels, again, safer. But it's not what anyone wants. Everyone wants to change, right? There's probably, no matter where are at in your life, there's always something that I think that we are looking to ideally grow within or see change in, or we can dream and imagine. But kind of bringing this back to, as I brought up, like the nervous system,
Yeah.
something that has felt especially prevalent recently. I always see cycles in like the clients I'm working with in similar patterns and like what everyone's feeling around the same time, which I think is really beautiful because it's kind of like this parallel process of like we are not alone.
Yeah.
I get to see that, but sometimes, my clients don't because they're not witnessing each other's sessions. But
Yeah, you feel alone in these feelings, and then you realize no, everyone is experiencing these to some degree.
yeah. But the nervous system's really a big part about body image because, again, back to me saying, like, I think we're taught to abandon our bodies. That's the same thing that happens when trauma happens, right? Like we abandon our body, we go into dissociation, our body goes into fight, flight, freeze, like our digestion stops, our, so many different things in our body, not to go into all the details, like stop or freeze, or we literally like leave our mind, leave our body. And we're doing that in small, small moments, or maybe it feels like big moments every day. And when you used the phrase of like, I've never succeeded at this, I always fail. There's this piece that like maybe feels a connection to a trauma response. And so I'll talk a little bit about cravings, but
Yeah.
the nervous system in relationship to food and exercise is constantly finding like this fight, flight, freeze response of I need to feel comfort, but have I ever felt comfort here before? And a lot of
Interesting.
the times, like, I can speak for myself. I've had a challenging relationship with my body just based on how bodies were talked about for me in my home, and how they continue to be, honestly, in many ways. However, the more that we can find comfort within and notice, ooh, I'm craving a sweet food. There's a reason we're craving a sweet food, a salty food, maybe more caffeine. We're craving something emotional, and the nervous system is wanting to find peace. It's wanting to feel like it can relax
Yeah.
and really go from this heightened state of our world of like, what's the next thing on my to-do list? What checkbox did I miss today? We live up here in this hyper arousal state, and we're constantly using food, exercise, our phone, social media, anything that brings us more instant gratification, comfort, to take our nervous system down because we haven't been taught how to do that on our own.
That is such an important piece because that is what a lot of people I've seen struggle with. It's like they have that, they're hit with stress or anxiety or even boredom, and they immediately turn to food for that like quick dopamine hit. So I've seen that those quick dopamine hits aren't nearly as impactful for, long-term soothing, I guess, for lack of a better word, as opposed to, some more intentional things. So I guess instead of that quick dopamine hit, like when people are hit with that, like, I need food or I need to go to the gym to like get this stress out, what are some things that they could do instead of just looking for that like quick soothe? Like, what are more of those like long-term impactful steps that they could take?
Absolutely. Something immediately reminded me of is when you use that like 20-minute snack
Hmm.
rule. Um, Within that 20-minute period, some things that I would encourage is, again, back to the nervous system. How can you really check in with where is this emotion coming from? I'm noticing I want to crave food. I know externally I want that bag of chips or I want that candy bar or whatnot, but instead saying, where could this maybe be coming from? And so, from a nervous system regulation standpoint, there's a lot of great, really simple tools, whether that be certain breath work. Really, you're wanting to trigger in a calm way your vagus nerve. So, like certain ways to do that are like box breath or like an ujjayi breath in yoga. If you take yoga, adding a little bit of restriction, any vibration, actually like us talking to ourselves or saying an affirmation out loud, our body actually responds to the vibration of our specific voice. It's like our cells know that
Oh,
we're
that's so cool.
ourselves. And so it actually really takes the nervous system down. Also, I use a lot of like tapping, like if you've heard of EFT, emotional the EFT technique. I'm blanking here. But it's really like bringing more physical awareness to your body. So like if you're noticing tightness in your chest, like tap on that spot. Your collarbones, your cheekbones, like there's a lot of different ways to just say like, I'm here, I'm present. Like when my body feels like I'm not here, I'm not present, I'm wanting to really abandon my body. Sometimes we go to those cravings because we're not comfortable in our
Yeah.
body. Food takes us out of the discomfort of the moment. So anything to bring your system kind of back online, I would say. Another really awesome technique, and this one is one that I've really resonated recently with, is like shaking.
Okay.
There's something really beneficial to shaking the quote unquote emotion, not out of your system, but recognizing it. So often when we have an uncomfortable emotion, like I even noticed this within therapy, it's like, how do I fix that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that
Right.
is me.
Yes.
My therapist is always like, no, 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 we're not fixing everything. Like,
Right. We want the quick fix. And I totally, I'm right there with you. Like, I want it to go away.
yeah.
It actually creates a lot of challenge within the quote unquote healing transformation process because we're not able to really embrace the more challenging emotion. We need to build resiliency around discomfort. And so when we shake, say you're feeling really anxious, the shaking actually kind of replicates that anxious feeling, right? You're feeling jittery, you're feeling heightened. And so shaking can say, oh, I'm feeling anxious. And what if you just told yourself, I'm feeling anxious, and you're shaking your arms, you're shaking your legs, you're shaking your hands, or you're feeling sad? Like, what physical movement would replicate that feeling for you, and kind of finding ways to play more around with honoring, naming, validating the emotion, and then say, do I still think that, a piece of chocolate might feel good to me? Like, sure. And I think that's the other point that I think is really important here is like not saying that you're bad for doing something
Yes.
you may need. It's okay. And the more that you again detach, that was bad that I had that candy bar today. I think the more you're building a really beautiful relationship with food is like it can be comforting, and that's okay. And that's like we really do have a cool relationship, I think, at times in society with food. It brings people together. It
Yes.
like builds relationship. A lot of times, you come together around food, you have celebration, you have ritual, you have tradition around food, and that naturally is going to associate us with a lot of comfort.
I think that's a really important piece is, like, do you want to deal, quote unquote, with all of your emotions by eating? No, that's probably not going to set you up for like a lot of long-term success, but is it okay if food is still comforting? Like, is it okay that you still decide to indulge a craving? Or, is it okay that after taking those 20 minutes and, trying to bring some more awareness within your nervous system, you're still choosing to have that food? Yeah, but instead of it just being on autopilot and you're just always going into immediate like soothing comfort, I think it's like what you said, it's more about bringing the awareness to it and then understanding and making the active choice.
Yes. Yeah, autopilot is a great way to put it. I always say it's like number one, step one, recognize you have the craving. Step two often is, all right, I'm going to fill that craving. I'm going to go grab
Yeah.
that thing I want or go do that thing that I always do. You're missing this step in the middle of what's happening for me right now. And if you take 30 seconds, it can be so quick, so fast, and say, I'm going to take one deep, full breath in and deep, full breath out, and then say, what emotion can I name right now? Feeling heightened, feeling anxious. I'm feeling unloved. I'm feeling unworthy. I'm feeling rejected. Now, what am I feeling called to do? Can I sit in this a little bit more? Do I have time for that? Can I create time for that? Even if I feel like I have another obligation, is there something that I can do to open space for this emotion to move, create space for that emotion to move? And then, yeah, do I want to go do that thing still? Do I want to go have that food still? So absolutely, yeah, just holding this space in between the autopilot reaction.
And I would imagine that is like a really important part of the healing journey is just being okay with some discomfort. Like I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of these habits that we, create around food or alcohol, it's because we're trying to avoid any sort of feeling of discomfort. Like for me personally, a lot of my like anxiety I tried to control with work. So if I was feeling anxious, I just went and worked more. And I've really had to work to say, like, are you working because you truly have things to do, or are you working because you feel uncomfortable and you're trying to relieve some anxiety? So I think the first step is probably just knowing that discomfort and being uncomfortable is okay.
Absolutely. And I actually love, Brooks, that you bring up like working, because we associate being productive from a work standpoint as very positive. So that
Yes.
coping mechanism of I'm gonna go work more can be, we can associate something really positive around that of like, oh, look how hard Brooks is working, look how successful she is. When on the flip side, if we go binge food, we associate that as, I'm a piece of shit. I
Yeah.
and so like everything, like so many of the things we do are a coping mechanism, and kind of bringing this overarching bigger picture bird's eye view awareness to like, what am I doing when things get hard, when they get sticky, when I'm feeling resistance, when I'm feeling uncomfortable, and noticing our knee-jerk reaction to go to. It often comes from, what we were modeled. My dad, has his own business, everything surrounded around work. Like your worthiness is based on your success, how many hours you put in, what that looks like from a paycheck, or at least what you can say you did today. And so much then, our coping mechanisms come from that place of what we were shown. But yeah, I would love to talk a little bit about the craving piece because I know you
Yeah.
brought it up, and I think that piece of it becomes really interesting when you can find that little in between step of naming the emotion. Um, Cravings can be really associated with, again, the emotional piece underneath it. However, for instance, as I mentioned, we want love, we want reward, we want comfort. And underneath, we often want to numb through food, exercise, in our body because it's external and we can see it, we can visualize it, we can see it in the mirror. But for instance, when we're craving like a sweet food, often that's coming from a place of not feeling love, not feeling that sweetness, not feeling that nurturing. And so just simply noticing, oh, I'm like, over the last week, I've been really wanting like more chocolate after every meal, or something maybe that, brings that sweetness. I also think, say you're craving a lot of caffeine. There's something like, what does caffeine do? It kind of brings you up. And so it might be coming from a place of not feeling alive, not feeling that like jittery, like excitement, not feeling awake, not feeling
Yeah.
energized in your life. And so noticing that craving of caffeine might be coming from that place. What could I do around not feeling alive that isn't associated with caffeine? Like what do I have control over? And then salty foods. If we think about salt, right, we're like retaining in. There's a lot of different things salty foods can be associated with, that like crunchiness. Like if you're craving a crunchy
Hmm.
food, you might be feeling like a crunchy emotion, like anxiety,
Interesting. Wow.
anger. And so kind of noticing even the texture of foods can bring a lot of awareness to like, ooh, am I feeling something that feels like the texture of this food? So you might feel like some resistance, you might feel out of control, something that you want to break through. You want to break through around, you're probably wanting something crunchy or saltier, like a chip, right? Salty foods can also be kind of associated with like creativity and wanting to bring in more creativity, feel like more self-expression in your life. So simply another way to notice, what am I craving right now? Can I again take that awareness of the craving and say, is this associated with a feeling that I haven't taken the time to tune into?
That is so interesting. I didn't know any of that. Like, I didn't know that certain cravings that you were having could be, more in line with certain things you're working through. But hearing you talk about caffeine, I remember before I quit my full-time job and like before I started coaching full-time, I was drinking so much caffeine. Like I felt like I was having like at least 2 cups in the morning, and then I always felt like I needed more in the afternoon. And like you said, it was like I was craving it. Like I was like, I need an iced coffee, and iced coffee sounds so good. And
Yeah.
then I think it was because I was just so like
Mm.
run down and just I don't want to say miserable in my job that I was doing because I wasn't, but
Kinda.
it yeah, but it just like wasn't lighting me up, you know? And now it's like I have 1 to 2 cups of coffee in the morning and I'm good. Like my energy levels are good. I'm not like craving that caffeine. So it really does like all tie back like that.
Totally, totally. Yeah, and you wanted to feel more alive. Uh,
Yeah.
something that I am, I really try to, I'm very passionate about working spiritually with my clients. And so, like, what we're really here to do on this planet is to feel alive, to not feel alive based on what somebody else thinks feeling alive is, but like what makes you feel alive? What makes you feel aligned? And when you were in that, past job, similarly to me, like working in traditional therapy, there was a part of me that didn't feel aligned. I was like, denying a piece of me that felt like, oh, I'm made for more. I could be more aligned in how I'm working with clients. I could feel more like I'm honoring like my true gifts or what I'm most passionate about. And so the more that we can notice, how could I step into more alignment? The more actually your body is going to respond positively because you're going to feel like those cravings are going to shift and you're going to feel more like at peace with maybe what you are naturally wanting to eat and just flowing with that. And then your body actually often positively responds because your cortisol levels are lower, your stress
Yep.
levels are lower, you're more aligned, and then your body's not holding on to all of this nutrients. It's actually able to digest and take what it needs, release what it doesn't. But when you're not in alignment, when you're in that fight, flight, freeze response, your body's holding on to everything like you may be in danger. And so, it's holding on to that extra quote unquote fat or extra calories or extra, XYZ nutrients out of protection of you if you are truly, at risk.
I think that just shows too, like how important it is to start ditching some of these labels, and start giving your permission to, for me, I remember when I quit my full-time job, I was struggling at first because I always had this view of success. And I was like, I'm going to climb the corporate ladder and I'm going to reach X position. And then I, realized I wasn't fulfilled doing that. And I had this other huge passion, which was coaching people. And now I'm like way more fulfilled, but it took a lot of work to actually give myself permission to like ditch that label and like find this alignment. So it's so important, but it's almost like I could see how it could be daunting for people to start to, I guess, is there like a good way for people to start to like recognize where their like true alignment might be or where like their big passion lies or how to start finding some of that fulfillment? Because sometimes I just feel quote unquote lucky that I stumbled upon something I'm really passionate about. And how do people start to find those things?
Yeah, $1 million question,
Yeah.
right? Such a great thing to be able to talk about. I think a few things come to mind for me. A lot of people, as you say, um, ask themselves, how do I find my purpose? And I think we all kind of attach our purpose to our work because it's the majority of our week, it's the majority of our time, right? Like 40 plus hours a week. Like this is what we do. This is how I label myself. When you meet somebody, often one of the first things you ask is, what do you do?
Yeah.
It's another societal conditioning thing of like, well, this is just normal. This is who I am. You're not what you do, but how can you feel more purpose? I think that's really just associated with how do you feel most alive? Like,
Okay.
what
Yeah.
makes you feel present? What makes you feel inspired? Like, that could be as simple as like going for a walk outside in the sun. It could be being by the river. It could be like having a really intentional conversation with a partner or a friend. It could be being in a new environment. And so I always encourage people, it doesn't need to be, it's actually more simple than you think. Life is more simple, healing is more simple. Like we are the people that make it so hard for ourselves because of these labels. But because you ask for like more tools, a I think first and foremost, being in community comes to mind for me as at least somewhere on the top of that totem pole. The more that we can be really vulnerable with people and say, oh, wow, somebody else is also struggling finding their purpose. They're also feeling a little bit of misalignment, um, is really important to like bounce ideas off of people and help somebody else's process, help you see your own path forward. That's another part of like how I work with clients that I think is really crucial is like we're each other's mirrors. Like
Yeah.
in this world, we need to like be close to other people and hear how they're choosing to live their life because it opens something us in our awareness of like, oh, I could do that too. Or, oh, that makes something like a light bulb like flash in my mind of something that I forgot that I really loved or have some interest in that I never thought I would be interested in. For instance, when you bring up like you left your corporate job and found coaching, like coaching is working for you right now as it's working for me right now. And like I would imagine the way that I start working with clients, like 10 years down the line might look different. And so
Yeah.
like our alignment is constantly looking different at different points in our lives. So community, huge. Let yourself be vulnerable with other people. You're creating this space that everybody needs. And you're not a burden for doing so. That's something I feel comes up a lot of people feel they're a burden for taking up space. Everyone needs that space. So can you make it more reciprocal? And then I'd really just boil it down to community. And the second thing being you have to carve out time for yourself.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
Everything else comes above our relationship with ourselves. Other people do, our work does, getting that workout in, meal prepping, like all these different things are just to-do list, to-do list, to-do list. And we have much more control than we think. We often feel like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so busy, and you're at the expense of life. And that's like such a sad way to live, to be at expense of your own life, of all the things we have to do. And, don't get me wrong, life is hard sometimes, and we all feel that overwhelm. But you get the choice to say, no, I need to take a full hour for myself in the morning, uninterrupted, to flow right. I talk about like journaling in that way of just like, what's coming up? What things do I need to hear today? Or taking time for yourself to just listen to a podcast so you can hear, that mirroring process of somebody else thinking about themselves or bringing up a new topic. That time intentionally with yourself to tune into your emotion, tune into your body, tune into what makes you feel alive, see if you can feel more of that like light alignment is crucial. And then, yeah, working with people like you, like me, like other people that can like hold that space is always, an added bonus.
I'm so glad you brought up that piece about choosing to make the time for yourself because I do tend to work with a lot of women who are very, they are high achievers. They have a million things on their to-do list. They're taking care of their entire families and they're performing really well at work and they're letting all those things come first. Like they'll schedule a workout at lunch and then they skip it because they have like work to do. But it's starting to recognize that if you carve out that time for yourself for those things that make you feel alive, even if it's only like 10 minutes at first, I would imagine it allows the rest of your day to be so much more positive and allows you to approach it in not this like burned out state if you're constantly prioritizing other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're really kind of bringing up to like this lack mentality or scarcity mentality of like, well, if I don't get this work done right now, like everything's gonna fall apart. And
Yeah.
making that time for yourself like does need to be the biggest priority because it again like you said like really allows you to excel in all areas of being a parent, of being your own cheerleader, of being a partner, of being a dog parent, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it may be. Like it could be as like funny or simple as you want to make it, but you do come first. And I know that sounds so cliche in any of this kind of like therapy like healing work. It's like you come first. It's like yeah, there of course, but we don't really practice it. And so finding your own way right now in this moment, can I take 5 minutes? Again, it doesn't need to be an hour, it doesn't need to be, meditating for 30 minutes every morning. It's like what works for me today.
Yeah, I think people feel that taking time for themselves is selfish, but
Mhm.
really, like you just said, it allows you to show up so much better for like every other area of your life. So it's not selfish, it's really necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody told me once, or using the word selfish, and selfless, right? Like that's the two sides of the coin is like you're either selfish or you're selfless. Um, Being selfless, right? Of like just giving, 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 giving. That word in itself is like having no self, selfless.
Yeah.
And that really opened my eyes and was like an aha moment for me of like, well, why do we want to be that way? Like we are
Yeah.
conditioned to not have a self and just be available, giving at all times. And like, trust me, that's like my biggest thing that I
Yeah.
like tried to heal from is like, oh, like I actually get to come first. And the more that I have a sense of self, the more I get to give from this full cup. And a lot of my worth over in my life so far has come from giving. And I'm like, wow, I'm like, really, I feel like finding my groove of like, no, I get to come first, and how much then my cup overflows with how much then I can give to other people in return.
That's just so powerful because going back to those labels, I feel like selfish is always given a negative label and selfless is giving a positive label. But like you said, selfless, you're not taking care of
So,
yourself. But yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, Rachel, this was seriously such an amazing, impactful conversation. I am so excited for everyone to listen to it. Is there anything else that you want to leave people with? Anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, just a few closing thoughts. Um, Something I've been leaning into is kind of along the lines of getting out of the labels. How can you shake up your norm? I think like even when you work with clients, Brooks, it's like you're shaking up the way that they have approached food, the way that they can be more accountable and really write things down and see it on paper or whatnot. The more that you can shake up the way you normally do things, the more you're creating like neurological openness for new pathways. And so think about how can I approach my transformation differently? If I were to like shake it all up, so I'm like destructing what currently is, then I get to create space for something new. Like we need destruction in order to be in a state of like rebirth or recreation. So like I do sound healing with my clients. It's like, let's break up this energy and just do something like funky, different, something that maybe
Yeah.
all of my clients haven't done. I do like private yoga or private sound healing to like, again, bring you more in tune with your body, really say, let's not talk about everything and just sink in. um, Again, we kind of can be in that fight, flight, freeze response by verbally processing it all. It's in that hyper arousal state often, like talk, 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 try to make sense, try to intellectualize. So anything, any of the listeners can come up with of what brings me more into not talking, just being, not doing, just being, the more change and transformation in space I think you can create. And then just another emphasis, encourage yourself to be compassionate. I think that is one of the most powerful things that we can sink into is compassion to ourselves. It opens space for moderation. It opens space to like be playful. Playfulness is something that's been huge for me with my clients lately, is like, let's have some fun with it. Like
Yes.
that
Yes.
breaks up some of the space of like feeling boxed, feeling like it's hard. Like have fun. It gives your body the space to move that energy around, to feel like, this doesn't need to like be so by the book, one step after the other, one check box after the other, one number on the scale after the other. It's like it just has this room for flexibility and fun and aliveness again that we're all needing. So it doesn't have to be so hard. So yeah, I would love to, connect with any listeners that have questions. That, is always something that brings me a lot of joy, is just like being able to share some space in these conversations. So anyone is, always welcome to reach out to me.
Yeah, so where can people find you? I'll link like all your socials, your website in the show notes, but if you want to just shout out your Instagram or website, so people can immediately search for you because I know they're going to be like, I need to talk to Rachel right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some new fun and upcoming things just with some new technologies I'm working with, some retreats, workshops, and obviously classes and whatnot that they can, come and hang out with me with unless they, want to work with me in a client capacity. I am accepting new clients right now, but people can find me on Instagram at Your Guide to Be. And my website is www.guidetobe.com. So lots more info there. Everyone can, schedule a free consultation, and lots of offerings that would be great to connect with more people with.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. This has been such an amazing episode. I so appreciate you coming on, and I'll talk to you guys all soon.
Bye bye.